Hi, everyone. Carl Steinbeck here. Tonight, we're going to cover today's highlights. We're also going to cover the last bit of yesterday's first, before we jump into today's, to cover Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, the guy that was one of the first at the scene there at 34 Fairview. So let's go ahead and bring that in here. Here's a cross by Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, is this video up there yours or is it the Commonwealth?
Not mine. Or is it?
All right.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher, you have already established that you were at the scene on January 29th, early morning, January 29th, 2022. We've seen the video of the leaf blower, correct?
That is correct.
So you were integral to at least an initial search of the scene, which recovered the drinking glass that you've shown us, as well as some of the blood byproduct that you've talked about.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. You were the ranking person on scene. You've already described that.
Yes, that is correct.
There were also several other officers from Canton PD who were there with you.
Yes, there was 4 other officers. Yes.
Can you just name those other officers?
Yeah. Detective Sergeant Lank, Lank, Detective Sergeant Good, Goode, Officer Mullaney, Mullaney, and Officer Saraf, Saraf.
Okay. When you initially, let me back up and ask a different question. Given the fact that you were the ranking officer, the way that it works in a police department is everybody sort of reports up the chain of command, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So they would have all reported up to you in some particular.
That's correct.
And then, of course, you report to I think you're the deputy chief, and then the deputy chief reports on up to the chief, correct?
That is correct.
You were involved in not only the exposing of some of that blood byproduct, but also exposing the glass with the leaf blower, correct?
That is correct.
You were responsible for utilizing certain equipment. You chose a leaf blower at the time, correct?
I did, yes.
There was also, I'm guessing, there was also some use of your hands and or the gloved hands with some others to recover some of the items.
Yeah, I didn't use my hands.
How did you get the glass into a bag?
That was Detective Sergeant Lank.
Somebody had to pick it up, right?
Correct.
That's what I mean. The use of hands to manipulate some of the evidence, correct?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't understand that question.
That's okay.
I thought you were speaking about me.
It's probably my fault, not yours.
No, that's okay.
There was also some plastic cups that we've talked about. We'll talk more about those in a second. Those were utilized as well, correct?
You were, yes.
And you were responsible for the use of those as well.
Yes, it was my decision, yes.
In terms of the search of the scene, the recovery of evidence, the recovery of biological material, the use of tools to recover those biological materials, all of that rested at least ultimately at the scene on your shoulders, correct?
Yes, it did.
Isn't it?
And see, he already arrived at the scene, and when he was doing this, he had already realized that John O'Keefe was dead. So once you have a dead body there, this is something that is transferred automatically to state police. So why is he even doing this? Then he gets a leaf blower instead of waiting for the crime scene investigators to show up from the state. This makes no sense at all. Really ridiculous that they wouldn't wait to make sure this is collected in the proper manner. You don't use leaf blowers, for crying out loud. This is like so childlike, juvenile behavior here. And this guy's a lieutenant. He's retired when he testified here yesterday and today, but he was raking in $322,000 a year, mind you. I mean, that's like, I know, and that's an expensive place to live. I mean, the police officers there, law enforcement there, they're living so large that if you look at the federal government, the only one in the federal government that makes more than this guy, in the federal government I'm talking now, is the president of the United States. They make like 480,000, I think it is. But this guy's raking in 322,000 as a lieutenant. I mean, 4-star generals don't even make that much. Cabinet level secretaries don't make that much. The vice president of the United States doesn't even make that much. So and then you wonder how they can botch this stuff up, but I guess they don't have to care because they're making so much money that they sit back and, not make waves and you can continue to get that kind of payout.
True that you weren't interviewed in this case with regard to anything having to do with this case until April 3rd, 2024, correct?
Yes, we can call it an interview. It's when I met with the prosecutor, yes.
And that was about 2.5 years, nearly 2.5 years after this incident, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Michael Proctor, you know that name?
I do.
Who's Michael Proctor?
He was one of the troopers assigned to investigate the case.
As a matter of fact, he was the lead investigator for the case, correct?
I don't know if he was lead or trooper mechanic. I don't know.
As you sit here, you don't know that Michael Proctor was the lead case agent for...
I know he was one of them, yes.
Okay. Do you know that he was the lead investigator assigned to the case?
I don't. I had nothing to do with the DA's office.
Right. I know you didn't have...
I don't know how they assign their cases, counsel. I don't know what you want me to say. I can't say what I don't know.
Mr. Gallagher, I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking if...
I did not know he was lead. I know he was one of the leads.
Okay.
I believe they do it in a tandem, but I'm not sure.
Okay. He may have had a partner, correct?
That is correct, yes.
But it's not unusual to have a lead case agent, the person who's responsible for most of the search warrant writing and the memorialization of documentation of evidence collection and the movement of evidence and booking into evidence, things like that.
That is correct, but I don't know anything about who wrote their affidavits or who logged their evidence in. I wouldn't know that.
You're also familiar with Yuri Buchanan, correct?
I know who he is.
You're also familiar with Lieutenant Tully?
I know, yes.
They're all Massachusetts State Police officers, correct?
Yes, they all are.
Did
Yes.
Michael Proctor interview you before April of 2024?
He did not.
Did Yuri Buchanan interview you before April of 2024?
No, he did
Did
not.
Lieutenant Tully interview you before April of 2024?
No, he did not.
Did anybody else from the Canton Police Department, your deputy chief or the chief, interview you formally about your conduct and responsibilities before April of 2024?
I don't understand that question.
Did anybody at Canton PD, separating out Massachusetts State Police,
Correct.
did you sit down at Canton PD and provide an interview with anybody at Canton PD about your conduct at the scene?
What do you mean by conduct?
Going to the scene, collecting evidence, securing evidence, transporting evidence, booking evidence, those kinds of things. Your conduct at the scene, sir.
Yeah, I briefed my superiors, yes.
Okay, other than briefing, was there a formal report written
No,
or a formal interview conducted of you?
no, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he would have learned about Proctor just from watching the news. You tell me all the cops aren't talking about Proctor around that station?
Tell us when you wrote your report about what happened at the scene, memorializing what you did at the scene.
I didn't.
You didn't write a report?
About the scene that day at the scene?
Correct, about this investigation.
I only did the metadata report. I did not write a report at the scene.
You never, in fact, the fact is you never wrote any report about what happened at the scene, correct?
Correct.
You didn't memorialize that in any formal way on Canton PD letterhead to describe what you did and how you did it at the scene.
No.
Normally, when you report to a scene as a first responder, you would be expected to write a report about that, whatever that conduct is.
I'm not the supervisor, no.
What if you're the ranking person at a scene that ultimately turns into a homicide scene?
Well, we don't know it's a homicide scene at this time. We don't even know there's a crime committed at this time. My
Understood.
responsibilities are to make sure reports are written, not to necessarily write the reports myself. I'm the supervisor. It's my job to make sure reports are written, evidence is logged, those types of things.
Under ordinary circumstances, you would respond to a scene as a supervisor and you would oversee what other people are doing.
That's correct.
Can I finish?
Sure.
I don't want to talk over each other.
I apologize.
You would want to supervise or oversee what your subordinate officers, whatever he or she might be doing or they might be doing you're going to oversee that. But they're the ones actually conducting the investigation or picking up evidence or doing the interviews, writing those things of that nature.
Correct. Detective Sergeant Lake's investigation, yes.
So in that circumstance, you wouldn't be expected to write a report because all of that conduct is memorialized by other.
Yeah, I don't know why his voice isn't coming through as good. I mean, you hear Brennan really getting louder, it seems like, and he's just sort of hard to hear at different times, fading in the background.
Subordinate to the supervisor, correct?
Correct.
But in this case, quite the opposite happened. You were the one that was in the video utilizing the leaf blower, correct?
That's correct.
You were the one that actually exposed the drinking glass, correct?
Correct, yes.
You noted the drinking glass and actually called somebody else over to take a look at it, correct?
That's correct.
You directed someone, Sergeant Lang, to pick up the drinking glass and recover it as a potential piece of evidence,
That
correct?
is correct.
You noted the blood or the coagulation of blood in and around that area, correct?
That is correct.
You noted where you believe the drinking glass was, in other words, what location, if there were grid coordinates, where it would be, correct?
Correct.
And you instructed others to transport that important evidence back to Canton PD to have it booked, correct?
That is correct.
You also secured the plastic containers in which to recover the blood.
That is
right?
correct.
You also directed someone to get a bag to put the plastic containers in and ultimately transport it, correct?
That is correct.
So you would agree with me, Mr. Gallagher, that in this circumstance, you were the centerpiece of the recovery of evidence and the investigation as it was at that time in that limited context. You were the centerpiece of what was happening at the scene, correct?
And I made sure it was documented by Detective Sergeant Lang.
But you didn't find it important enough to write a report yourself.
I think that's poor misrepresentation.
I think it was an officer, Saraf, that did a pulse check on John O'Keefe and saw that he was already dead there. So I think that they had to know this is a homicide they need to investigate. The injuries to the back of his head is not consistent with somebody just walking down the street and falling down. So they have to assume the worst, like you're saying here, Sam.
There's a person fighting for their life. It was very important.
When you were there at the scene at what time was it, by the way?
I got there shortly after 7.
Okay, you knew that person who was fighting for his life had already been transported and was in good care, as best care we can provide at Good Samaritan Hospital, correct?
That is correct.
So certainly you're not excusing away the idea that you didn't memorialize your conduct because you were too busy fighting for someone's life. That's not what you're saying.
No, it definitely is not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Obviously, reporting to a scene and supervising a scene is one thing, but actually gathering evidence is a whole next level. You would agree with that?
Sure.
Because just to put a fine point on it, responding to a scene as a supervisor, you want to make sure everybody's doing their duty, but the officer or officers who, for instance, uncover, let's say it's a knife or a gun or some weapon or something.
I think he wants to be so agreeable with the defense. He doesn't want to be cross-examined and get tripped up here. That's why I think he's doing all this, trying to agree and shake his head at times. He's just trying to have it where he's not going to get some kind of question that's going to be a zinger at him.
Like that. Actually documenting and picking up that evidence and handling it up in an appropriate way, that is all highly, highly technical. It's very important to get it right and memorialize it all, correct?
That is correct.
That's why you're highly trained to memorialize and report.
It's like he's just indifferent. It's like he's just, it's like he's there for a fender bender traffic case or something. It's like not a big deal.
Everything that you do in that regard in a report that can later be used forensically, in other words, in a courtroom setting, to recreate as best you can with as much detail as you can exactly what you did and how you did it and where it was done, correct?
Sure. Yes.
Officer Lank wrote a report in this case.
Sure.
Did Officer Mullaney?
I believe he did, yes.
Did Officer Seraph?
Yes.
Officer Good? Sergeant
Yes.
Good?
Yes,
But you did not.
I did not.
Who was the first officer to find any potential physical evidence at the scene, be it blood or glass?
I can't answer that. It was not me. I was not the first thing that was spotted was the pink spotting, not the glass.
Okay. Who was the first person to see the glass?
I think it was myself as I uncovered it with the leaf blower.
One of the important things that we've talked about, Mr. Gallagher, is documenting the details of evidence recovery, not just the fact that something was recovered, correct?
That's correct.
So you'd want to know what time of day it was recovered, correct?
Sure.
You'd want to know who was there and who was around when it was recovered, correct?
Yes.
You'd want to know what the item is, the condition of the item, right?
Yes.
You'd also want to know exactly where it's recovered, correct?
Yes.
In other words, as best you can to pinpoint the exact location where an item was found. That could play a huge role in any investigation, be it criminal or otherwise.
It could. It could.
Did you diagram or draw a diagram back at Canton PD or
I did
out
not.
at the scene?
No.
About where that glass was found?
No, I did no reports or diagrams.
Did you diagram exactly where you recovered the blood spots that you did recover?
No.
Did you at least, if you didn't write a report, did you at least take notes on a pad about what you were doing?
The conditions weren't, it was pretty hard to take notes at that time, but I did not take notes, no.
At some point, you mentioned a person by the name of Tom Kelleher, Deputy Chief Kelleher.
That's correct.
Who is Deputy Chief Kelleher?
He's the deputy chief of Canton Police.
He was active on active duty at the time? When I say active duty, I don't mean that morning, that hour. I mean just generally.
Yes, he was a lieutenant at that time.
He was someone to whom, as a matter of fact, probably the only person to whom at Canton PD you actually reported, correct? Up the chain of command. He was the only person to whom you reported up the chain of command, meaning he was your direct report.
He was in charge of detectives at that time.
And
yes.
then, of course, the chief would be above him, correct?
Deputy chief and chief.
Okay. When you responded to the scene, Deputy Chief Kelleher did not come out of his house and take over the investigation, correct?
Correct.
That was yours to detail,
That is correct.
at least while you were there.
That is correct.
So can you describe what you did to preserve the crime scene? I'm sorry, to preserve the scene, because at that time you said you did not know if it was a crime scene. Is that right?
That's correct.
What did you do in terms of actually preserving the scene for later investigation? What steps did you take?
For later, can you explain later investigation?
So let me take a step back.
Sure.
Have you been trained to preserve scenes?
Yes.
Okay. What's the reason that you want to preserve a scene? What does that mean?
Collect evidence.
Collect evidence to make sure nothing is disturbed.
Correct.
Civilians can't.
Yeah, they hardly had any body cameras. And so if they don't have body cameras, those are provided by federal funding. So no agency should be without those at all.
Traipse through, walk through evidence, correct?
That's correct.
You've heard the phrase forensically, evidence in, evidence out. Someone traipses through a crime scene, you bring
Correct.
evidence with you, and you take it back out with you on your shoes or on your feet or your breath or your saliva, whatever it might be.
Very familiar with that, yes.
Preserving the scene is best efforts, it's best practices to make sure that nothing is moved, touched, messed with in any way, correct?
That's correct, and that's what was done here.
Okay. What did you do? That's my question. What did you do to preserve that scene?
So there were no civilians ever to trample through. Were rescue efforts made on Mr. O'Keefe? Yes, that's priority. So rescue workers do go into any type of scene. Medical life-saving measures come first. Once all apparatus was off scene, the original officers put out crime scene tape to mark an area. And later it was documented, it was photographed, and Evidence was collected.
And it was searched by you, at least initially with the leaf blower.
Correct.
Okay. So you were interested in the area that, by the way, I want to clear this up, make sure I'm not mistaken. You described for Mr. Brennan basically where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, correct?
Yes, yes,
You never saw his body in situ. You never saw his body in place.
that is correct.
You were told by Sergeant Lank generally where his body was, correct?
Yes, and Sergeant Lank actually never saw Mr. O'Keefe either.
That's my next question.
Okay,
Sergeant Lank,
and Mr. Good and Sergeant Good as well.
right, never saw.
Yeah, but like I say, Sarath had already said that there was no pulse. So basically, John O'Keefe already knew he was dead when he took off in the ambulance. So given that it's a homicide, you got to preserve it as a crime scene.
Sergeant Lank never saw John O'Keefe actually in place, correct?
That is correct.
So you're receiving information from Sergeant Lank that he did not have personal knowledge of, and then you're providing that information later to crime scene investigators who are trying to establish a diagram or some sort of a chart about where that evidence was, where the drinking glass was, where his body was, correct?
No, I never spoke to anybody in that manner about that.
Didn't you ultimately go out to the scene along with others at Massachusetts State Police when they had a drone overhead?
No, you're mistaken. I can clarify it for you if you wish.
Sure.
So on February 1st, after the execution of the warrant, they wanted to go down to the scene. It was Trooper Proctor and somebody from the CARS team. I'm not sure of the name. Once they got down there, I did show them where I was shown John O'Keefe was. They did want to put up a drone, but they could not do it because they were too close to Norwood Airport and because of FAA regulations.
Okay.
And that was the last of my involvement with
So-
that. I hope that clarifies things for you.
Forget the drone. I'm interested in the first part, which was you accompanied Trooper Proctor to the
Correct.
scene, correct?
Correct.
There were other members of the CARS, CARS.
I think there was one. Crash accident reconstruction section, I'm assuming.
Okay, so it's a forensic, a member of MSP who does forensic diagrams, correct?
I would say. I don't know if they do diagrams. I don't know what they do.
Or reconstruction of some sort.
Sure, reconstruction of some sort.
So you were there to help provide information about where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
And be a Canton police officer present in case any neighbors had come out.
So you were there to help provide information about, or at least you did provide information to them about where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found.
Oh, sure, yes.
Except you didn't see Mr. O'Keefe's body, did you?
No, I did not.
So that was a guess on your part.
It was what I was shown. It's the information I had.
Yeah, it was the information you were told by Sergeant Lang, correct?
Yes,
Who also didn't see John O'Keefe in place on the ground at 34 Ferry, correct?
that is correct, yes.
So
I'm just wondering, is the jury not hearing Jackson like we are? He's not coming up on the mic well. So you need to have a commanding voice in the courtroom. And so if he's fading away and his mic's not picking up good, I don't know if he's standing further away or what the deal is, but that needs to be fixed by the defense.
his would be a guess also, correct?
Well, we're going backwards. So he was told by Sergeant Good and et cetera. So it was information passed along, which is what police officers do.
Right. But the police officer that was out there at the scene, who was helping the reconstructionist establish a formal report, and the CARS report was an officer who not only didn't see where John O'Keefe's body was, you got information about where John's body was from someone who didn't see it either. Correct? Can we at least agree
no.
on that?
You have to go back to the beginning. I didn't understand the beginning of that question.
Sure,
It was very
I'll try it
long.
again. The point is, Mr. Gallagher, you happen to be tapped as the person who is going to assist the CARS folks, the MSP, in creating their CARS,
No.
ultimately their CARS report.
No,
Isn't it true that you accompanied Trooper Proctor and members of the CARS unit to document Fairview Road and the scene of the incident?
yeah, I thought I explained it could not be done.
Okay.
So
I'm not
I
asking
wasn't,
you-
I only went to show them where Mr. O'Keefe was and in case any neighbors came out. I wasn't there to assist in any documentation at all.
You were there. Maybe Brian Tully is.
He's the lead guy. Everybody on that scene should have written a statement of what they observed, what was going on. So just to say you're the senior guy on the scene and you're not going to write anything up, you're just sort of watching what's going on. You're sort of looking for stuff. I mean, where's the crime scene unit? You shouldn't have been doing any of that kind of searching. You should have been looking out and waiting for the scene to be preserved until the crime scene investigators could show up.
Have you reviewed Brian Tully's report?
I have not. You showed me one section of it.
Is it true that what you actually told Brian Tully is that you went with Trooper Proctor, and you're already shaking your head now. I didn't finish the question.
No.
I got that part
Yeah, they don't really call him Officer John O'Keefe at all, I noticed.
wrong. You accompanied Trooper Proctor?
No, what's wrong is I was interviewed by Lieutenant Tully. That was a meeting I had with Prosecutor Lally.
Okay.
Trooper Tully was present. Trooper Tully never asked me any question. I don't recall Trooper Tully ever asking me a question, sir.
So let me be a little bit more defined. So in Trooper Tully's report, where he reports what you said, you were actually talking to Adam Lally, my colleague sitting up in front.
Correct.
Okay. So now we got that cleared up. Let me ask you again. Did you say in front of Trooper Tully that you accompanied Trooper Proctor and members of the CARS unit to document Fairview Road?
Meaning they were documenting Fairview Road. It's not clear. The report's not clear. They were going to document Fairview Road, not me.
So you just said something that I want to follow up on.
Okay,
The report's not clear, correct?
that's correct.
So that's an inaccurate report.
I wouldn't call it inaccurate at all. I'm just saying you're misinterpreting the wording.
I see. And I'm misinterpreting it even though I just read it directly from the report?
Yeah, sometimes sentences have different meanings.
Okay.
Yes, you are.
Okay. The reality is you did end up going to the scene, correct?
I did.
And you accompanied, I don't want to use a word that you'll challenge, you went with Trooper Proctor, correct?
I took my cruiser to 34
Okay.
Fairview, yes.
You were there at the same time Trooper Proctor was?
Yes,
And you were aware that the CARS team was there so that they could document the scene, correct?
I don't know what the purpose of the drone was. I'm not familiar with that section. I thought I answered that question. I'm not familiar with what they do.
But you do believe that as you sit here, you were there, we weren't. You do
Right.
believe that that's the reason that they were there was to document the scene.
Put up a drone.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean by document. I don't know if it was to photograph, I guess, which if you mean by document photograph, I guess it could, I would agree. If it means take measurements, I wouldn't know.
Okay. Did you tell any of the members of the CARS team where you believed John's body was?
I believe it was Trooper Proctor, but I believe he was there, yes.
Trooper Proctor obviously was not there when John's body was there either, correct?
That is correct,
So
yes.
he would have gotten that information.
From you. That is correct.
Now that's 3 people.
It's probably more, quite honestly, yeah.
Well, I'm just talking about this report,
Correct.
CARS report. That's 3 people in line. None of them saw John's body, John O'Keefe's body, as it lay in the lawn with Mr. Crump.
That is correct, yes.
And there's no photographs
Of,
of Mr. O'Keefe
oh, no,
at the location.
no, we wouldn't, nobody would photograph somebody undergoing life-saving measures. Wouldn't be appropriate.
There's no video specifically.
They wouldn't take video of somebody undergoing
there's
life-saving measurements
There's no
either.
body cam.
We don't have body cameras.
There's no dash cam that shows it.
Well, dash cameras would be on the road. Mr. O'Keefe was approximately 8 to 10 feet off the road.
Well, hang on a second. You're not sure where Mr. O'Keefe was because you never saw him.
That's why I used a range, yes.
Right. So you don't know-
I know where the blood was. I know where the glass was.
Right. And you don't know if he was 7 to 9 feet off. if he
That's
was
correct.
4 to 12 feet off. You can't say.
I could- Only approximately. You are correct, yes.
You did meet with Officer Seraph. You met with all the officers when you arrived at the scene, correct?
Yes,
And Officer Seraph had been there from the beginning of the morning.
yes.
Officer Seraph didn't report to you at that time any statements attributable to my client, did he?
He did not know.
You later went back to 34 Fairview with Sergeant Lank,
That's correct.
and you rode back. Did you ride back to Canton PD with Sergeant Lank or separate cruisers?
Which time? I
I'm
apologize.
sorry. That's a
We don't know where those other broken pieces are. I mean, that should be pretty easy to find. There should be more than one big piece.
vague question on my part. You went back to 34 Fairview with just Officer Lank, and you described the circumstance in which you went in, you were let in by Brian Albert. He went to the kitchen. You were in the family room or some other place.
Right by the kitchen, yeah.
Right by
the
the
room
kitchen.
off the kitchen, yes.
Okay, so right next to where he was interviewing
That's correct.
Jennifer McCabe.
Yes.
Did you ride back from that meeting with, or that event to Canton PD with Sergeant Lank?
Yes.
And Sergeant Lank didn't say anything to you about his interview with Jennifer McCabe at that time.
I don't recall our conversation on the way back.
Okay. And you didn't write a report about any conversation that you had with Officer Seraph. You didn't write a report about any conversation you had with Sergeant Lank.
No, they're responsible for writing their own reports.
Got it.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to. He doesn't write reports.
You did say that let me back up and ask a different question. You testified about a year ago in another proceeding. You talked a little bit about the evidence collection of the biological material, the blood, or the, I'm guessing at that time, presumed blood. You haven't done any testing.
That's correct, yes, sir.
But you assumed it was blood just because of your experience and it looked like it could be blood on the street.
That's correct.
How far were you from Canton PD, approximately?
A mile and a half.
Mile and a half. You had your cruiser with you,
I had my personal vehicle with me.
your personal vehicle. In other words, you were ambulance where you could get from point A to point B if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was the scene supervisor. I wasn't leaving the scene.
Okay. But you also had subordinate folks at the scene that you could have dispatched had you wanted to.
Correct.
They all had cruisers
Yes, they did.
or personal vehicles. I'm not sure which.
I'm sorry?
Or personal vehicles. I'm not sure which.
I was the only one with a personal vehicle. Detective Sergeant Lank had a Toyota Tundra pickup truck that is not marked, but it's assigned to our detective unit.
So if you wish to, as the ranking officer out of the scene, you could have dispatched one or more of those officers to run an errand, to go do something in furtherance of the investigation had you wanted to.
Yes, he's not at the podium. That's where we're losing his voice.
Yeah, I actually did that.
Okay, you did. What did you
Yes.
do in that regard?
Remember, I sent Sergeant Good to get the leaf blower.
Got it. You also know that Canton PD has evidence collection bags at Canton PD.
Yes.
You also know that they have materials and tools to gather.
I think Karen looks more serious than she has in the past. I think she looks a little bit worried, and I think she's somber. And I think before she was coming across as too self-assured and too confident. So I think her having this more of a nervous look, a worried look, I think is a better thing. You should be worried and not feel like you got it in the bag. This jury's going to do the right thing. They know you're innocent, and you just basically got to get through this trial, and you're going to walk home completely exonerated. So I think this look that she's been carrying here it started, I think, last week. So she's much more tight-lipped, firm, and serious about what she's facing here.
Biological material, correct?
We do have swabs, yes.
And those swabs go in little containers to maintain their sanitary nature, correct?
That is correct,
In
yes.
other words, if you see a blood stain, you don't just walk up with a Kleenex that you find on the ground and wipe it up. There's your blood stain. There's a process for gathering that type of evidence, correct?
Sure. If you're looking for DNA, you can use a bloody Kleenex, to your point.
It'd be kind of an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. My point exactly.
But if you're a mile from the Canton PD,
Yeah,
you could have gone back and done a swab,
could have.
but you didn't.
Didn't want to because of the weather, because you just said because it's an emergency, and we thought it was an emergency there. I mean, the storm was coming down terribly, and I believe if we didn't collect that biological matter, we weren't going to get that biological matter.
But Canton PD was a mile and a half away.
Okay, but it was so cold that morning that it was still going to be intact until CSI would have showed up. So I don't buy that for a second.
4 or
In-
5 minutes.
In a blizzard,
Still, in a blizzard, I feel like it's 3 minutes in good weather, probably 4, 5, 6 minutes in a blizzard, correct?
I'm not sure.
So let's call it 12, 15 minutes. You certainly could have gone back. If you wanted to, you could have dispatched one of your officers to go back and get swabs and properly collect the blood material. right?
Sure. And I believed 15 minutes would have made a difference.
And what you did instead is, well, 15 minutes would have made a difference, but you asked Sergeant Good to drive to his house and get a leaf blower.
Yes, and while he was doing that, we were documenting the scene with photographs.
You could have documented the scene with photographs even if you went back and get a swab. What's the difference?
Because we were ongoing. It was ongoing. I wasn't leaving the scene.
I didn't ask you to leave the scene. I mean, I didn't ask if you were
I
leaving the scene.
needed the other officers. We talked about scene security. I already let one officer go. I now have 3 left. We're securing that scene.
So you saw pink stains in the snow, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you said, Officer Good, probably called him Sean, Sarge, go home and get a leaf blower.
That is correct.
Could have said, Officer Mulaney, get your butt over to Canton PD and pick up 10 swabs, correct?
He wouldn't have had access to the swabs.
Oh, so now one of your officers could have gotten swabs, even if the lieutenant, a ranking lieutenant, had dispatched him to go get a swab.
Because he doesn't have access to the BCI, the Office of BCI, where our stuff is kept.
Could you have made a phone call?
No, nobody there would have had access at that time.
No, I've not dealt with a younger jury like I'm hearing that is going on here with this case, but they just have a lot of different views on things and just normal everyday kind of living. But the one thing I think so that could be a disadvantage for the defense if they don't really understand how things are supposed to work, how the willingness of people to lie. I think the older we get, the more the general public, anyway, I mean, I've seen this so many decades now, is trying cases in the criminal defense arena, but I think general population doesn't really understand how much people lie on a regular basis. And so these younger folks may be a little bit naive about that, but I think this trial, hopefully they're seeing how bad it really gets. And so this also, I think what the one main benefit from the defense is all this stuff about the butt dials and the deleted calls and I didn't delete the text and all this kind of like excuses that they have. I don't think these young tech type folks will fall for that at all. So I think that's a big plus for the defense.
Time it was only Officer Dever on the desk.
So you're the only person that could have gotten those swabs?
Sergeant Lang could have gotten them as well.
So Sergeant Lang could have too?
Sure.
But you didn't say that?
No, definitely didn't.
Okay. What you did do, however, is you went to the neighbor's house. That would be Tom Kellerman, right?
The lieutenant of detectives, yes.
Right. And Lieutenant Gallagher gave you red Solo cups.
Yes. I asked for plastic or glass containers. He had Solo cups, and I utilized them.
The same kind of Solo cups that we all see at backyard barbecues.
Yep, they hold liquid terrifically.
They're also not sealed, correct?
They are not.
They're also not used normally. I mean, they did.
I mean, this is like so far off the normal procedure for law enforcement to preserve evidence, collect biological evidence, and they're going to use Solo cups that aren't sanitary. Number one, even if they're brand new, they're not going to have sanitation required of crime scene processing. So for them to use that to process blood recovered on the scene, well, where's that 3 liters of blood? And where's that grass that we heard about from Carrie, that John was laying in some grass? So let's see if this comes up.
They were here. They're not normally used for evidence collection, correct?
Oh, absolutely not.
And then you decided we needed to transport that very important biological
Because he only looked in a small area. He didn't look over the rest of the areas. But he did look by the curb, which he called the berm. So
material back to Canton PD for storage and safekeeping, right?
That's correct.
And why was it important to transport that blood material. So what are the factors that you consider, weight and balance, in terms of getting that material back to Canton PD in good condition, sanitary condition?
So a criminalist could extract a proper DNA sample.
What would happen, for instance, if that blood material, I don't know, were contaminated?
Contaminated how?
You tell me, you're the professional.
So DNA is pretty hardy, pretty forensically stable. The only things that are going to harm it are radiation, ultraviolet light, harsh chemicals such as bleach. That's not present here. I wasn't. Then you would have 2 sets of DNA when it's tested, which would benefit you.
Well, it depends on whose DNA it is.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, Mo,
Yes.
All right, let's, well,
while you were, I'm going to stay on this for a second. So obviously, there's a reason why blood swabs or biological swabs are handled with such care. For instance, a DNA analyst is going to put on gloves.
Correct.
Oftentimes, they're going to put on a mask, right?
I don't know about that.
Oftentimes, they put on goggles. Is that right?
It depends what they're testing.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you go out and collect something, you'll see CSI, crime scene investigators, in full body suits when they
Sure.
walk into a crime scene.
Yeah, you can.
Because you don't want to contaminate the scene with your own hair off your arm or an eyelash falling into a blood stain, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So there are protocols, and you said just a second ago, Mr. Gallagher, well, it's DNA, unless somebody pours bleach in it, you're pretty much golden, right? That's not quite the fact.
And that's not quite what I said.
No, it's not quite what you said. You were suggesting that it's hardy enough that it doesn't really matter.
No.
It's contaminated.
I think the other thing is that these tech guys, they're going to be doing social media reviews. You know, the judge every morning talks about, have you done your own research, investigation, words to that effect? And so, you know, they're just looking at going, I'm not doing research or investigation. I'm looking at other people's research and investigations. So they're going to be looking at other stuff on YouTube about the case and comparing it to what they see during the day and looking to see what we have for folks critiquing what happened during the day. So that's what I think these younger folks are going to be more likely to do. And they're not going to think anything of it, not following the judge's instruction to a T, because she's talking about doing, like I say, doing your own research and investigation work. So
Not. If there's multiple people's DNA, it just benefits everybody.
No, I simply asked what you meant by contamination.
Okay. So it could be contaminated with debris, is that right?
Sure, it can.
It could be contaminated with other people's DNA, is that right?
It can.
It could be contaminated with foreign items, foreign either aerosols or somebody's spittle when they're talking, correct?
Sure.
It could be contaminated with 1,000 things.
Hypothetically.
Right.
Larry, you're asking why will the judge won't allow FBI retired agent Michael Easter be a defense expert witness on proper crime scene protocol? Seems so biased and unfair. This is like open and shut, reversible error. That's how bad it is, but that's how much desperation the prosecution has and the judge to get Karen Reed convicted. And that's what really sets me off. When you're not even trying to play fair, but you're playing by rules that are that in violent confrontation with the Constitution that they cannot even make any sense of it. They know they're violating the Constitution by doing that. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Is that bad? They are that much in the mode that we got to convict her, and the only way we can do it, as I've said time and time again, the only way Hank Brennan can win is if he hides the truth. And we saw it today. I saw today that there was a motion to exclude anything about the Sandra Birchmore case, the one that the feds took over. She was murdered in Canton. These Canton police officers, you got lieutenants running around making $322,000 left and right. I've never seen so many lieutenants on a small police department like this. And they ruled that a suicide. It was such a botched investigation that the feds took it over. So this is the kind of people we're dealing with here.
Of course, these solo cups didn't have lids on them, right?
They did not.
They were open.
Yes.
You didn't photograph where you picked up the samples.
No.
You didn't document where you picked up the samples.
No.
So if the samples were in 6, how many solo cups were there?
I mean, there should have been, it should have been with the crime scene guys putting a grid out there, showing measurements, little tents showing where stuff is found and marking it, showing where stuff is in relation to each other. So that's the kind of stuff, CSI folks do. So this is like a couple of kids running around trying, oh, look what we can find here. There's just no professionalism. There's no proper police investigation done on this at all.
There?
6.
6 solo cups. We don't know as we sit here where each of those solo cups contents came from specifically, do we?
Specifically, no.
Okay. Then those solo cups with no lids were placed into a bag, right?
That's correct.
You said on direct examination that this was a brown paper bag, right?
It is. Stop and Shop, I believe.
And you said that
It's like he's proud of. Oh yeah, Stop and Shop. Yeah, hey, those are really good evidence collection bags. Also contaminated with stuff for maybe the person's DNA when they stuck their hand in the bag to grab all this food they got out of there, or groceries or whatever they got.
that Stop and Shop bag is, other than having the words Stop and Shop on it versus evidence on it, basically the one and the same thing.
Same dimensions, made out of the same materials, yes.
Right. But with an evidence bag,
Where's the 3 liters of blood? That's what I want to know. That should have been so obvious. This guy got bashed in the head so bad. You got a big, massive amount of blood there. He basically bled out, and they got no conversation about that, no photographs of it, nothing like that.
know exactly where it came from and who's handling it.
Not necessarily.
Comes from a manufacturer
Sure.
whose job it is to secure those bags so that they are not mishandled, so they can have some sort of bona fides that they're clean and ready to accept evidence. In, say, for instance, I don't know, the investigation of a homicide of a police officer.
Okay.
Important stuff, right?
We're not at a homicide of a police officer at this point.
I'm just talking about evidence bags in general. Evidence bags in general. In other words, I'm trying to think of some of the most important investigations around. The manufacturers of those evidence bags manufacture them and send them in a way so that their bona fides, the provenance of those bags is maintained, correct, and protected.
Yeah, Corey, he acts like the standard procedure. And that's why this whole thing about the defense not being able to rebut his testimony, you can only rebut it through cross-examination. That's what the judge said in her ruling, that through cross-examination and common knowledge that the jurors have of police procedures, that's how Karen's going to get a fair trial. It's just such a travesty. It's such an outrage. I can't even tell you how furious that makes me, but I just got to chalk it up as you guys can see how wicked and evil this system is. So that's the one good thing. America can see how bad prosecutors are in trying to hide the evidence. And you can't have a judge that's really bad that just looks the other way to all this going on.
That's the way they ship them, yes.
Right. And Canton PD pays extra money for those bags for that very purpose.
I'm sure they do, yes.
You mentioned almost tongue in cheek, look, except for the price,
Yeah.
they're probably pretty close.
Yes.
There's a reason that there's a price difference, right?
What would the reason? What's the reason?
Well, it's not the shop, I can go pay 10 cents
Yeah.
for that bag, because I don't really give a hoot where it's been or who's handling it. Right? It's got my milk and my eggs in it. Really don't care.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they price it because of how they package it. I don't have any knowledge of that.
Well, you're the one that mentioned the price. I'm just
Oh,
trying to
no,
make
no,
a
no.
point.
Yeah, I
There's a
agree
reason.
with you on that.
I'm sorry, we're speaking over each other. Okay.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gallagher, you gotta wait for me.
Yep.
There's a reason. My point is, there's a reason, right?
Yes.
That evidence bags are more expensive because there is a way they're manufactured and they're taken care of, and Canton PD is willing to pay that extra price like every other law enforcement agency because of that, correct? All right. So they're not quite the same, are they?
No.
Yeah, the garage door, I think, to me, makes the most sense to support this defense theory.
Those solo cups were placed in the evidence bag uncovered.
Yes.
The evidence bag was then placed in Sergeant Lank's vehicle,
It was closed and Sergeant Lang transported it to his vehicle. Yes,
Okay. When you say closed, you mean the top of it was rolled up?
correct,
Or folded over?
correct.
It wasn't forensically sealed.
Not at that time, no.
There was no evidence tape that went on it.
Not at that time, no.
Matter of fact, the cups were still open and could slosh around.
Uh,
Assume they melted.
yes,
There's liquid blood and liquid water, like
that's correct.
snow.
That's correct.
Yeah, come to think of it, I've never seen a murder case where we don't even see autopsy photos. We're on starting week 3 here. We've already completed 2 days into week 3, and we still haven't seen autopsy photos. It's really bizarre.
And you indicated that those were, at least you believe, those were placed in an evidence locker, temporary evidence locker, correct?
No, the blood samples were put in a refrigerated unit.
My mistake. I thought the refrigerator was the temporary storage locker. It's different?
Yes, lockers are not refrigerated. That's where the glass would go into a locker.
Okay. This was placed into an evidence refrigerator.
That's correct.
That was to maintain the integrity of the sample, the biological sample inside the cups, correct?
That's correct.
I've not heard that it's from the bar. So which glass is this from? Is it from inside the house? Can someone clarify that, please?
Do you have an evidence log of that?
I don't know.
You've never seen an evidence log indicating that those were actually put into a refrigerated evidence locker.
I removed them myself, so I know they were in the refrigerated unit
When did you remove them?
on February 1st.
Right.
Yeah, so no evidence log whatsoever. He's ever seen one on this case. That's like elementary 101 type thing. If you have an evidence log, the evidence really should not even be admissible.
We're talking about January 29th. They were taken to Canton PD by Officer Lang, Sergeant Lang, on January 29th. I'm just asking,
Right.
well, let me ask a foundational question. Does Canton PD maintain something called evidence logs?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not the evidence officer.
No.
There is, it's all computerized.
Right.
So like I explained earlier, when they do get logged in, the officer puts the description of the property, hits the space bar, and the computer generates an evidence number.
Right. And
And-
that evidence number is associated with just that piece of evidence.
Just that piece of evidence, correct?
And every time it's checked out or put back in, there is a log created, correct?
Yeah, they do it by computer, yes.
It's a digital fingerprint.
Correct.
All right. I mean, you're a former narco specialist, right?
Mhm.
You did narcotics for years, right?
I did.
Drugs, about the most sensitive thing out there, right? I mean, you get a bottle of fentanyl. You're not just going to go set it on
Of
the
course.
evidence sergeant's desk. You're going to make sure that damn thing gets logged exactly how it's supposed to, correct?
Of course.
Because it needs to have a trace of where it goes and who touches it and who has access to it, correct?
That is correct.
You've never seen an evidence log for these items that were taken from 34 Fairview and supposedly put into, well, not supposedly because you took them out, and
That's correct.
ultimately went into a refrigerated evidence log.
Yeah, I wouldn't have access to the evidence log. Our evidence room is a very strict process. There's only 2 people that can even have access to the permanent, once it goes into permanent evidence. And it's the admin sergeant that changes.
Oh, permanent evidence. So yeah, that can take a while to get there, right? Meanwhile, it can be contaminated and lost and moved around and mixed around, stuff added to it. Where are the photos of this stuff? Why wouldn't they take photographs? It's so bizarre.
The custody when it comes out for court, if an item has to come out for court, or it has to be transported to another agency, or if an officer needs it removed from evidence for further inspection, the admin sergeant would take care of that.
That's the way it's.
Mr. Jackson, you're not going to finish today, right?
No, I'm
In
not.
2 minutes.
Two questions, and I'm also.
All right, 2 questions.
Thank you. That's the way it's supposed to work, correct?
Yes,
But you've never, as you sit here, you've never seen an evidence log determining where that blood went and who was handling it between January 29th and February 1st.
I have never seen an evidence log.
That's all I had, Ron, at least at this time.
All right, Lieutenant, we're going to have you come back tomorrow.
Okay, Bugs Bunny, can Ken Reed be be sued in civil court for wrongful death if she's found not guilty. Yes, because those are different standards of proof. A criminal proceeding, the proof is higher than it is in civil. The proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil cases, it's only preponderance of the evidence, so it's a lower standard. It's more like a 5149, more likely than not standard. So that is something that's totally different. So now with that, I'm going to go ahead and remove yesterday's. Let's jump to today's to continue on. Okay, here we go.
At the scene, if we could go back to that, when you engaged the leaf blower. During the time that you were removing materials in and around the area of the flagpole going out to the, I think you called it the berm, B-E-R-M, the berm, the curb.
Yes, that was at the street. There was a 6-inch Cape Cod berm. Yes.
Okay, and that led straight to the asphalt of the street, correct?
It's basically a curbing. It's
Okay.
where
There's a 3-liter
property line, the grass, the lawn meets the street.
And you were searching the area where you believed Mr. O'Keefe's body to have been found, all the way out toward that curb or berm area, correct?
Yeah, we did not go out to the berm. We did about approximately 6x6, 7x7, about 50 square feet.
50
area.
square feet. Okay, fair enough. But you did say at some point, I think on direct examination, you said that you exposed the berm
Yes.
just to give you some orientation as to where the curb was, where the street was.
And if it was possible, he may have tripped and fallen. Yes.
Okay. You did not recover or see a hat, a man's hat,
No, sir.
black in color, like baseball style hat.
No hat. No, sir.
You did not see or recover a man's shoe.
No, sir.
And you said you searched for the area in that 50 square foot area by removing materials, moving the snow, getting down to all the way down to the lawn.
Yes.
Okay. You did not see a single piece of bright red plastic taillight material either, did you?
No, sir. Not in that area.
As a matter of fact, you didn't see 46 pieces of taillight material, either clear or bright red plastic, in any part of the area that you searched.
No, the only thing we discovered was the blood sampling and the glass. That is correct.
Speaking of the glass, that's a good segue. You found that piece of broken drinking glass that you brought in and showed the jurors yesterday, correct?
That's correct.
Did you search the house at all to determine whether or not there was any matching glass in the home?
No, I did not.
You testified yesterday that you looked around when you were in the house. This is the second time you're at the location. So you went back with Sergeant Lenk. I want to orient you to that time. That's when you actually entered the home for the first time of Brian Albert. Was that right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And you indicated that you did look around the family room, the kitchen, and you didn't see any signs of a struggle or anything like that.
No, sir.
I asked you that exact question about a year ago at another proceeding. Do you recall that colloquy between the two of us?
Yes.
And at that time, I asked you, did you look around the house for any sign of a struggle or a fight? And your answer was no. Do you remember that?
Yes, I think that's out of context. I understood that question was, did I wander the house to look for any sign of a struggle? I believe you asked me if I went to asked me about a bulkhead and things of that nature.
Okay.
As I stood there, I have observations I can see.
Right.
So I think it's just a miscommunication on what type of search.
Fair
or
enough.
What type of observation.
Fair enough. Let's clear that up right now then, Ms. Gallagher. With regard to your the time that you were inside the residence, you did not seek to or ask permission to look around any place other than where you happen to be standing, which is right inside that front door of the family room, sort of adjacent to the kitchen area, correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
You didn't walk into any adjacent rooms.
None of them are modular sleep.
No, sir.
Okay. You didn't walk into any. You didn't search the kitchen area.
I did not. No, sir.
You didn't look through the cabinets or anything like that.
Absolutely not. No.
You didn't look at the glassware.
Absolutely not. No.
You didn't go down to the basement. We talked about that previously.
Correct.
And-
No, absolutely not.
Okay. You didn't go out to the garage?
No, sir.
You
No,
didn't look around the garage?
no.
Other than walking in and basically where you just described standing while Sergeant Lank was engaged with Miss McCabe, you didn't do anything to search the interior of that house for anything?
No, I wasn't there to search at all.
Okay.
Look, he's proud of it. He just was sort of standing there and really doesn't really have an interest in what's going on.
You also didn't, subsequent to that, you didn't seek or receive a search warrant?
No, I did not.
Okay. You didn't believe that it was necessary, in your mind, it was necessary to seek a search warrant to search the interior of that house?
That's absolutely correct.
Proud of it.
You were aware at the
He's very proud of that.
time that you did go into the house that Sergeant Lank had earlier reported at least the possibility that John O'Keefe may have gotten into a fight, correct?
I don't recall that. We went over options on how he could have come to where he was, and an altercation certainly was one of them.
Okay, so that's fair enough. So an altercation meaning was one of, when you say altercation, that means a physical fight, correct?
Sure.
So that was a possibility in your mind.
Everything was a possibility at that time.
And at that time, you had the information that you found, or Mr. O'Keefe's body was found on the lawn of a residence where there was alcohol, drinking, a party of some sort, or a gathering of some sort, just hours earlier, correct?
That's correct, but the house had nothing to do with the incident.
At least to your mind.
That's correct, based on the evidence, yes, at that time.
And the evidence at that time was simply your communications with some, but not all, the occupants of the house, including Jennifer McCabe, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
You didn't separate any of the witnesses that were, or any of the occupants that you saw inside the house, or you came across inside the house, for instance, by taking them to the station, putting them in separate rooms so that they couldn't coordinate testimony, things of that nature?
At that time?
At that time.
So Detective Sergeant Lank was there to speak with Jennifer McCabe only.
Okay. But there were others in the house.
There were others in the house, yes.
I'm just trying to figure out whether or not you took the added step of separating those witnesses, asking those witnesses potentially to join you down at the station, putting them in separate rooms, separating those witnesses. You did not do that.
Not at that time, no.
Okay. At any time, did you?
No, we shortly thereafter, we were removed from the investigation. We removed ourselves from the investigation.
And before you were removed from the investigation, you just left the house after the conversation that Sergeant Lank had with Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Yes, after he took Jennifer McCabe's statement, we left the house, yes.
Is the reason that you didn't seek a search warrant or separate the witnesses or ask any of the potential witnesses to join you down at the station, did that have anything to do with your knowledge the homeowner was a police officer?
Absolutely none. I've actually executed warrants on police officers' houses in the past, including police officers I personally worked with and had to charge some of their children. So that absolutely would not factor into a reason.
And it didn't factor in this case?
Absolutely not.
That's my question. It did factor into your decision-making that Brian Albert was a police officer?
Absolutely not.
He didn't get any special treatment because of that?
Not by me, absolutely not.
Okay, not by you?
Not.
Okay.
I can only speak to my personal knowledge.
You were aware.
Okay, that's a whole lot different. Kids' criminal activity of law enforcement versus the actual law enforcement officer himself, and you're standing there, he's in the room. There's going to be some kind of like, hey, we okay here kind of thing where they're going to be able to just say, put this guy at ease. You can tell this guy would be like, he's not even looking to see if Alberts are acting suspicious at all. So he doesn't even bother to ask him, hey, what'd you hear last night? Would you hear anything? He's just standing around like, oh, big deal. Did you come outside, render aid or anything? What's going on? It's like he has no inquisitive mind. And this guy's a lieutenant making $322,000 a year at the time. Unbelievable.
That, and you indicated yesterday that the reason that Canton PD was removed from the investigation, or at least the interview section of the investigation, was because of a relationship of one of your detectives. You indicated your best detective, Kevin
Yes,
Albert,
that's right.
correct?
That's correct.
Or you gave Mr. Albert or Detective Albert very high praise,
He's a very good detective, yes.
and you were his direct supervisor.
I was at one point, yes.
Okay. You're aware that Kevin Albert was disciplined by the Canton Police Department for an incident occurring in July 2022, correct?
I am, yes.
Do you stand by your testimony knowing that Kevin Albert is your best detective, or was your best detective?
He's an excellent detective, yes.
You indicated that you contacted your deputy chief, Gallagher, and ultimately secured some solo cups from Deputy Chief Gallagher across the street, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
You were aware at the time that Deputy Chief Gallagher's house was adorned with a Ring video camera just over the front door, facing out toward the street and facing across the street, which would be facing 34 Fairview, correct?
That is incorrect. He does not have a Ring camera. I know that his system is an Arlo camera. And I have personal knowledge of that because we've discussed cameras because we bought them approximately the same time.
My mistake. Arlo camera, ARLO.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, that's still, although it's a different brand, it's still a home personal surveillance camera, correct?
Yes, but
And you're aware that those are motion activated cameras designed for security to capture images of things that may be going on outside the home.
that is correct, yes, sir.
May I approach, Your Honor,
Yes.
briefly?
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher, would you take a look at that photograph that I've just handed you?
Yes,
What's it marked for ID?
It is marked for ID, and Mr. Gallagher, if you could read that for me, so it'd save me a trip up to the stand.
I believe it's a 5, Exhibit 5.
Could it be an S?
It could be an S, yes.
I think it's S, Your Honor.
I apologize.
Let me, it is S? Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
I recognize the camera in the door.
Okay. Is that a shot of Deputy Chief Gallagher's, sorry.
That's okay. I know what you're asking.
Is this a shot of Deputy Chief Kelleher's front porch?
It appears to be.
Okay. Does that front porch face 34 Fairview?
We need a time frame.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
We need a time frame.
Sure. Did you see that Arlo camera so situated when you went over there on January 29th, 2022?
I knew it was there, yes.
Okay. And is that a fair representation of what the camera looked like and its positioning, basically its positioning in January of 2022?
Yes.
Okay. Did you seek the footage? From the
No, I
camera?
didn't. I know what that camera captures.
Okay. Your Honor, with the court's permission, when we publish, I'd like to mark this as evidence next in order.
Okay?
If I may approach.
Yes.
Is it 53?
Yeah, this guy, he just doesn't really care. He was collecting his paycheck then. He's collecting his retirement now. So nothing to get concerned or
May I
worried
publish, Your Honor?
about.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher, do you recognize this as being the photograph that you just saw, Exhibit 53?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm going to draw your attention. And by the way, there's one amendment to this photograph. There's a redaction of the address. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to draw your attention to that area right there, which I'm
Yes.
highlighting.
Yes.
What is that?
That is the Arlo camera.
Can you orient the jurors for us, please, to what we're looking at in this photograph?
You're looking at a camera that's angled downward.
And is it the front porch of that residence directly across the street from 34 Fairview?
It is not directly across from 34. It's actually more directly across from 32, so that would be incorrect.
Okay. Is it across the street from 34 generally?
It is, if Lieutenant Kelleher's house is here, 34 is over here across the street.
Okay. Is there a view from that front porch, just generally as you're standing there, if you were to turn 180 degrees and put your back to the door, is there a view of 34 Fairview as well as 32 Fairview?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Okay. Did you seek and we can take this down. Did you seek to secure any footage from that Arlo camera
I did not.
from Deputy Chief Gallagher?
I did not.
Did you talk to Deputy Chief Gallagher about that footage?
I don't remember specifically.
Did you ask him whether or not he had reviewed the footage for a determination whether or not it caught any of the incident that may have occurred at or around 34 Fairview on January 29th, the early morning hours of January 29th?
I don't know if I did. I know it would not have,
How do you know it would not have?
because I know what that camera captures.
How do you know what that camera captures?
Because I've picked up packages for Deputy Chief Gallagher in the past. I know it captures his doorstep and a portion of the front lawn.
So you've reviewed the Arlo footage from his
No.
iPhone?
He's just sent me a picture. Can I pick up when he's been on vacation, can I pick up a package on the front step?
Okay. So,
Yes, I've seen it.
so you've seen screenshots that
Sure.
Deputy Chief Gallagher sent you, correct?
I believe so, yes.
But you've never looked at the actual application to see what it might encapsulate or what it might capture generally.
Yeah.
We've compared what we have our cameras set up as. We had communicated about security at our
No
houses
initiative.
multiple times.
I mean, talk about Lieutenant Low Energy Gallagher here. This is like unbelievable. No initiative, no drive. Evidence has to basically just show up in his lap for him to do anything about it.
I know it captured the front door and a portion of the front lawn.
Do you believe that it would have been best practices to go ahead and secure that footage so we don't have to take anybody's word for it? We could actually look at the footage ourselves.
I didn't do that.
Do you think that would have been best practices to do that, just to have belt and suspenders? So there's no question about whether or not that camera that's facing, at least it's facing directly across the street, might have captured something of interest on the morning of January 29th, 2022.
To me, there was no expectation that it had captured anything. So I didn't think it was practical.
So because of your expectation, you didn't seek the footage and you didn't secure the footage.
Because of my knowledge and expectation, yes.
And you now know that that footage is gone. It's overwritten.
I would assume so. I'm not familiar with how long Arlo keeps footage.
So you are familiar enough that you decided that it wasn't important to capture the footage, but you're not familiar enough to know whether or not the footage is actually saved onto the Arlo system?
I don't know anything about it. I don't have Arlo cameras.
You won't see hundreds of attorneys showing up to contest this. So has any come online and talked about it? I saw there's something by Judge Erskine, but that's the only thing I've seen.
So I don't know anything about
So
the
you don't,
system, but
okay.
I have Blink. So we've compared our systems. So I'm not really sure what you're asking.
So you don't have an Arlo system.
I have Blink, correct.
You're not familiar with how Arlo works, correct?
Correct.
You're not familiar with the total array of where the cameras might capture versus what might be captured on your phone app, or that you can say, like, push a button that says packages or people, and it narrows the focus of the camera. You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Okay. But you would have been aware of that if you had captured the footage and simply said to Deputy Chief Gallagher,
He's got that smirk on his face. It's really strange.
I'd like that Ring footage for that 24-hour period.
Okay, it's not Ring. And
I'm sorry, that Arlo footage for a 24-hour period.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Did Deputy Chief Gallagher get any special treatment from you because he's a police officer?
No,
Did Deputy Chief Gallagher get any special treatment from you because he was your boss?
no, absolutely not.
Okay. You know Brian Higgins.
I do.
How do you know him?
Brian Higgins is a special agent with the ATF.
How long have you known him?
I first became aware of Brian Higgins probably around 2016, 2017, when I was with the DEA and we were working a Title III investigation, which is a wiretap investigation into gang activity, drug distribution in the Boston, Brockton area. I never had any personal contact with him at that time. He was just an agent in the group I was working for.
Ultimately, did that professional relationship seep into more of a personal relationship as well?
It did. So I think it was 2018 or 2019, the ATF had a satellite office at Canton PD, and he was one of the special agents that was assigned, yes.
So he actually officed in the brick and mortar location of Canton PD?
Yes, he did.
And did he maintain that office all the way through January of 2022?
He did, yes.
And during the course of your interaction with Mr. Higgins, did you become friendly with Mr. Higgins?
I've become friendly with Mr. Higgins, yes. Most of my coworkers I'm friendly with.
Is it safe to say that you socialized at times with Mr. Higgins?
I have, yes.
Okay. You've shared cocktails with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
Shared meals with Mr. Higgins?
Yes.
Okay. So it is safe to say that you have both a professional and a personal relationship with Mr. Higgins,
Yes, I do.
and you consider him a good friend.
Yes, I do.
You were aware, Mr. Gallagher, that he was at 34 Fairview on January 29th, those early morning hours, during the course of the time when John O'Keefe went to 34 Fairview.
I'm sorry, can you repeat
Sure.
that question?
You're aware that Mr. Higgins was at 34 Fairview in the home at the time that John O'Keefe went to 34 Fairview on January 29th, 2022.
By the time I became aware of it was afterwards, yes.
Okay. That's what I mean.
Yes,
I know
yes.
you weren't aware of it at the moment, but
Right, okay.
you became aware of it.
Later on, yes.
Okay. When did you become aware of it?
I'm not sure. It was after we were, I'm not really sure.
It was during the time that you were dispatched over to Brian Albert's house to ultimately either begin the investigation or go into the home with Sergeant Lank and interview with people there, correct?
No, that wasn't the time, no.
Didn't you say in a report to Lieutenant Tully that when you went over to Brian Albert's house, that Brian Higgins was not there?
I don't recall Brian Higgins being there.
Right. So what I'm trying to register is whether or not you knew at the time that you went to Brian Albert's house, at least that second time, that you might or might not have expected to see Brian Higgins there because you knew he was at the home when John O'Keefe arrived there the night before.
Can you rephrase that question? I'm not following you.
Sure. When you went back to, in other words, during the time that you were investigating and joining Sergeant Lank
Yes.
back over at Brian Albert's house, you knew that Brian Higgins had been somehow in that home the night before.
I don't believe I did at that time.
When do you think you learned that?
Sometime afterwards, probably when I saw the list and reviewed the narratives of the officers.
Would that have been days or weeks later?
No, it probably would have been, within 24 hours or so.
Okay, within 24 hours of your involvement.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay,
Thank you
I
for that.
apologize.
My bad. Bad questioning on my part. So within 24 hours of your involvement, which would have been, your involvement was the early morning hours of January 29th.
That's correct.
Correct? Within 24 hours of that, you knew Brian Higgins was somehow tangentially involved or collaterally involved as a potential witness, if nothing else.
I'm not sure he was a witness to anything. I was aware that he attended the house at 34 Fairview after they left the bar.
Right. And you said, well, I'm not sure he was a witness to anything. The one way to figure out whether or not someone is a witness to anything is to actually formally interview them, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Which you did not do.
We were removed from the investigation before I found out Brian Higgins was involved.
Okay, so you were removed.
So I wouldn't be interviewing him.
You were removed, and then it was within a few hours of that you realized that Brian Higgins was somehow involved.
Not a few hours. No, I said it was within 24 hours probably.
Okay. You're aware that Mr. Higgins not only had a office at Canton PD, he also had a key card for Canton PD.
Yes, he did.
Explain for the jurors what a key card or an access card at Canton PD means. What is that? What is a key card for Canton PD?
So it's a secure building. I think we've all seen it. You have the square boxes with the red light. The key card allows you access into the building. And depending upon your rank, you have different rights. Each individual has different rights to enter different areas.
You had, for instance, being a top level Canton lieutenant, you had a key card that was probably the functional equivalent of a master key card. You could get in pretty much any place you wanted.
Absolutely not.
Okay, where could you go?
It's easier if I say where I can't go.
That probably is easier.
Would that be work?
Explain that.
So I can't go to the armory, which is where weapons are kept and ammunition is kept, and I can't go into permanent evidence.
Okay. You're aware that Brian Higgins had a key card.
Yes, I am.
And that access card gave him access to pretty much, with the exception of the armory, possibly the evidence room, and what was the other location?
I think that's what I said, the evidence room
Okay.
and the armory.
With the exception of those, you're aware that Brian Higgins' key card gave him access basically to the entirety of the Canton Police Department?
Well, so I want to specify, I don't specifically know what Brian Higgins had rights to, but there are also parts of our department that are secured by key locks that he wouldn't have access to, and I don't have access to as well, offices and things of that nature.
I want to focus your attention on the Sally Port, if I
Okay.
could. You can enter the Sally Port, which is a fancy name for a garage, correct?
It certainly is, yes.
Okay. You can enter that from the outside, meaning out in the elements. You come from a parking lot adjacent to or that services the Sally Port. You can enter from there, correct?
Yes, there's one pedestrian door on the main entrance side, it's for location purposes. It's right beside the garage door that's marked number 4.
And the garage door is one of those big roll-up, industrial-style roll-up doors that comes up.
Yeah, that pedestrian door to the side of the garage. So they actually have 3 pedestrian doors. They got the front door, another door in the middle, and then another one to the right before you get to the double garage doors for vehicles to go through.
Down.
That is correct.
And then you can also enter the Sally Port from inside Canton PD, correct?
There are 2 locations you can enter the Sally Port from inside, yes.
And Brian Higgins' key card gave him access to both of those locations, the pedestrian portal going into the Sally Port from outside, as well as the pedestrian portal from inside Canton PD.
That would be correct.
Okay. Speaking of the Sally Port, you were, if not the person, one of the people who let Massachusetts State Police into the Sally Port on February 1st, 2022 to process the black SUV, correct? The Lexus.
I'm not sure if I was the one that gave them access, but like I said, I've testified, but I certainly would have.
Okay. That SUV had actually arrived on January 29th, 2022, 3 days earlier. Is that right?
I believe so, sometime after 5 or 6. I'm
So
not
it
sure at
was
the time.
in the Sally Port from January 29th all the way to February 1st, at least to your knowledge, for 3 full days in the Sally Port, correct?
2.5 to 3, yes.
Okay. From the time it arrived at Canton PD until it was processed out and moved out of the Sally Port, how many people would have had physical access to that SUV?
Everybody that possessed a key card.
And that's basically everybody at Canton PD that is a sworn officer, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Maybe even some civilians, correct?
I'm not sure of civilians. What civilian?
But do y'all have non-sworn civilians that
We don't.
appreciate things?
No, we do not. Well, we do, but I'm not sure whether they would have access, what their access is.
So at least the entirety of the police department, sworn police department, correct?
The uniform police.
Think about it. We still don't have Brian Albert and Brian Higgins testifying yet.
Yes,
As well as Brian Higgins, correct?
that is correct, yes.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, can I go back to something?
Sure.
When you were at 34 Fairview, when you walked in with Sergeant Lank, you walked in through the side door or the main door?
Side door.
Side door into the family room, correct?
I believe it's a family room, yes.
Walked into the kitchen, correct?
I was by the kitchen.
Adjacent to the
Yep.
kitchen. Did you see a dog?
I did not.
Right there, asked if he had seen Chloe. He said, I did not.
As well as Brian Higgins. They also would have had access to everything inside the Sally Port, whatever was left there.
Yes,
The SUV and other stuff, for lack of a better technical phrase, correct?
yes.
Okay. Did you photograph or did you cause to be photographed the SUV when it arrived on January 29th in your Sally Port?
But we had been recused at that point, and I wasn't working when the vehicle arrived. So
I thought you said you were recused only from doing interviews.
from doing investigative interviews, but I wasn't working when the vehicle came in.
Okay. So you could have taken photographs of the vehicle had you wanted to, or caused someone to do that had you wanted to.
I had no idea that vehicle was coming to Canton PD, sir.
Okay. Once you got to, as the lieutenant in charge, it seemed, was it important to you to know that a seminal piece of evidence had been moved in?
Yeah, and if they don't call him, then the judge will probably say, well, you can't bring him on as witnesses for the defense either to establish third-party culprit, which I hope the defense abandons. But that's another thing they'll try to do. The prosecutors, if he doesn't call either one of the Bryans, another example of trying to
This is
hide
the
the
custody
truth.
and control of Canton PD.
It wasn't important to me. It's the state police investigation.
Even though it
Again,
was on your property, in your Sally Port, with access through your key cards?
That's up to my chief. That's not up to me.
I see. To your knowledge, let me just ask it this way. To your knowledge, did anybody seek to photograph the vehicle when it arrived at Canton PD on January 29th, 2022, to your knowledge?
I have no personal knowledge of that.
Have you ever seen a photograph of that vehicle that was taken by someone in law enforcement on January 29th? I'm going to give you 3 days: January 29th, January 30th, January 31st, sorry, 30th, or February 1st.
I have seen photographs. I'm not sure what days they were taken. The photos were taken.
You have not seen a photograph that was taken on January 29th, however, have you?
I've never seen anything dated January 29th.
You've never seen a photo, and I'm going to go through this a little bit more. You've never seen a photograph that was taken on January 30th, have you?
Yeah, I have never seen any photographs with any dates on them.
Okay.
I believe.
Do you think that would have been you were at the time the head of detectives, correct?
No, that's not correct.
You were not. You had already moved from that spot? In January of 2022, I may be wrong. I thought as the lieutenant, you were also the head of detectives.
No, that was Lieutenant Gallagher at the time. I know you keep, it's a mix up. So we've had promotions since January 29th, and I think that's where the mix up might be.
So he was
when you refer to Deputy Chief Gallagher, he was actually Lieutenant Gallagher, and he was in charge of detectives at that time.
At some point, had you been in charge of detectives?
I became in charge of detectives in June of 2022.
June of 2022?
Yeah, approximately 6 months later.
Understood. You had been a detective previously, however.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
As a detective, do you believe that it would have been important to photograph, had you had your druthers to do it, it would have been important to photograph that vehicle when it came in so that it could be memorialized and documented the exact condition that vehicle came in on January 29th, 2022?
So this is important to know that, unfortunately, John O'Keefe was deceased at this time. Once John O'Keefe...
You know, they never say officer. They never say officer. This is so bizarre.
...becomes deceased, it becomes the state police's investigation, the Norfolk County District Attorney CPAC investigation. That's why it is not our investigation. It's up to the investigating agency to make those decisions.
Even something as uninvasive as taking photographs?
Yes.
Okay. You would agree, as a former detective and former head of detectives, that there are protocols for securing evidence of all types, correct?
Correct.
Those protocols dictate that not only is evidence properly secured, once it's seized, it needs to be properly secured, and it needs to be separated from other evidence to avoid something known as cross-contamination, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree with me that that is paramount in evidence handling in any investigation, correct?
Yes.
And that's because once evidence is cross-contaminated, its integrity basically collapses, right?
That's correct.
It's especially true of biological material, is that right?
Yes.
Because biological material, unlike a shovel, the biological material on the shovel becomes hypersensitive. It's hyper important. It can be cross-contaminated with other items.
Sure.
It can tell an incorrect story, correct?
Yes.
It could tell, if there's cross-contamination, it could tell a false story.
It's been done, yes.
And DNA, obviously, we're talking about biological material. The most sensitive of all the biological material is DNA evidence, right?
What do you mean sensitive?
So it might take some effort to move saliva from one item to another. It takes almost no effort to move DNA from one item to another and to detect it. You understand what I'm saying? The sensitivity of the detection.
No, I don't understand what you're saying.
You understand that I could touch this podium and you might not get my fingerprint off of it.
Correct.
Might not, correct?
Might not.
What do you think about getting my DNA off that podium that I just touched? You're absolutely going to get it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I mean by sensitivity.
Okay.
You would agree that DNA is hypersensitive.
I would agree that DNA is better than fingerprints, yes.
I'd like you to take a look at a series of photographs if we could. Can I approach John? Okay. There are 4 photographs, Mr. Gallagher, that I'd like you to look at briefly and familiarize yourself with if you can.
Yeah, I've not seen that. That judge doesn't allow him to be called officer. Okay.
Mr. Gallagher, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
I do.
How do you recognize what's depicted in each one of those? There's 4 of them in front of you. Just generally, how do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Generally, I know this is the exchange of custody from the Canton Police to Massachusetts State Police.
Are those taken inside the Sally Port, to your knowledge?
They are, yes.
Some of those photographs include the SUV,
One SUV picture, yes.
and some of those photographs include the blood evidence that you've earlier described, the solo cups, the Stop and Shop bag.
That is correct, yes, sir.
That approach?
Yes.
I mean, if you got the judge that's in your back pocket doing whatever you want to keep out the two of the worst witnesses you have for the government, then yeah, I can see him not calling them. He's only trying to show you what he thinks is bad evidence against Karen. He's not trying to show you neutral or evidence that exonerates Karen. The job of prosecutors is to do justice, just not get a conviction. Keep that in mind.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to have these marked as next in order.
Any objections to Brennan?
No objection, thank you.
Thankfully, we've not heard a lot of objections from Brennan on this, but I just think that Brennan's just letting this guy run, and he's not trying to control him at all because he figures, hey, this guy's coming across self-assured and
57.
confident. What he's saying is the way things are done in Canton. So AJ's not coming up with any big points on cross.
Thank you. Permission to publish, Your Honor.
Okay.
I'd like to start with what's been marked as 54. It shows a license plate. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes, based on the location, the vehicle, the broken taillight, I believe that's Miss Reed's vehicle.
And do you know when this photograph was taken?
I do not.
Do you believe it was taken between January 29th and February 1st?
Yes.
But you don't know when it was taken?
No, I don't have personal knowledge, no.
I just want to draw your attention very briefly, just to orient us to this area on the bottom right-hand corner. Do you see that, what looks like a white rag on the ground?
Yes, based on the pictures, I think it might be a paper towel, but yes.
Okay. If we could look at the next photograph, which is 55, looks like a paper bag. Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
What is that?
That's the Stop and Shop bag that contained the 6 samples.
Do you see the rag in that photograph as well?
Yeah, we could call it agree to call it a rag or
You
paper
think it's
towel.
a paper towel?
I'm not sure. It looks like a paper towel on the picture in the pictures, but it's a white object. Yes.
For all I care, it's the white thing. That's
Yes.
fine. All right. And do you see that that's next to a tire just at the top of the picture? Just for
Yeah,
orientation purposes.
Yeah, it appears to be 18 to 2 feet, 18 inches to 24 inches behind the tire. Yes.
Okay. And that, of course, is the tire of the SUV.
Yes, I would think
So
so.
that would be the right rear of the SUV, just a few inches from this bag, correct?
It would be a couple of feet from the bag. Yes.
Okay. If we could take a look at the next photograph. This is Exhibit 56 for the record. What's depicted inside the bag?
The red solo cups.
And you still see the
Look at that. That's how they collect evidence. Lieutenant, can the defense try again to get a law enforcement crime expert like the FBI guy? They can't come up with a new name, but they need to renew that motion because just cross-examining all these cops that Brennan is calling is not the same as calling another retired cop to explain how they botched this investigation. So he's trying to poke holes, make some points, but it's not the same as having a counterweight expert to rebut all that this guy's talking about and these other cops that Brennan's calling.
rag in the photograph.
I sure do. Yes.
So the SUV would be right here, correct? At the top of the left.
Well, I can't see the top of it. It would be, it's nearby. Yes.
Okay. And it's not just nearby, it's the right rear of
Just
the
dropping back.
SUV that's nearby, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one final photograph. This is Exhibit 57 for the record. What is inside that? What's depicted inside that bag?
The red solo cups with coagulated blood.
And these are the only, we can have the lights, please.
Yeah, that's what I think they're going to try to do, block everything, object everything, and that could very well happen.
And so if you take that down. These are the only photographs that we have or that you've ever seen of those red Solo cups, that Stop and Shop bag, and the biological material in.
I'm
those
deleting
red
some
Solo
comments,
cups.
guys. Let's keep it professional level here. I'm trying to have courtroom level discussions on this channel. So name calling or stuff that's cussing and swearing, stuff like that. Please refrain from that.
The only ones I have seen, yes.
And those photographs that you see are within 2.5 feet from the right rear of that SUV, correct?
Approximately, yes.
And the right rear of that SUV houses the taillight material, correct? Or the taillight
The
area.
tail light area, yes.
The cups were not sealed, correct?
The cups were not sealed.
The bag was not sealed, was it?
As far as I know,
Just an open
what do you
bag.
mean by sealed?
Yesterday, you brought a box in. You remember that?
Yes,
That box had tape on it.
that's correct.
What color was the tape?
Red.
Why is the tape red?
Oops, sorry. Gosh. Where was I at? Now, the point I was making is like, yeah, I know folks just want to like scream at this, the way this case is going on, but so I understand temptation and frustrations with it, but please keep that in mind.
Correct?
Correct.
Oftentimes, that tape has additional information on it as well, correct?
You could have initials on it of who put the tape on, yes.
Right. In other words, it might say evidence, correct? Might be pre-printed with the word
Pre-printed,
evidence.
yes, correct.
And it may have a place for initials to be.
Correct.
And one of the reasons that you initial it is because of that. If someone takes a razor blade and cuts through, or a knife and cuts through that tape, those initials are cut through. It has to be retaped and reinitialed, correct?
That is correct.
That is a basic protocol for chain of custody, is it not?
It should be like taught in law enforcement academies throughout the United States as to how not to do crime scene evidence processing.
Yes.
And that's to maintain the care, custody, and control and the integrity over the items and the items inside the evidence container, whatever they may be.
That's correct.
Whether they are biological material, physical items of evidence, a document, whatever.
Correct.
None of that was done with what we just saw, correct?
Correct.
We've agreed already that the blood was stored in non-sterile Solo cups, correct?
Correct.
We've agreed that those cups were not sealed. The cups themselves were not sealed. There was no cap. There was no plastic, plasticine, saran wrap, nothing put over the cups, correct?
That is correct.
So they were open.
Yes,
They were not in an evidence bag. They were in a grocery bag, correct?
they were. Yes.
Yesterday on direct examination, it may have been on cross-examination, Mr. Gallagher, I don't remember. You said, I have no idea where Sergeant Lang got that grocery bag, correct?
I don't know where the bag came from, no.
Could have come out of his back of his car seat, correct?
I'm assuming it came out of one of the cars, yes.
No idea what had been in that bag previous to those cups with blood being in the bag,
I have
correct?
no personal knowledge of that.
And obviously that bag, it goes without saying, is not a forensically sterile item either, correct?
Most bags are not sterilized.
And not only the cups were not sealed, the bag that the cups were in was not sealed.
They were only closed, correct.
You will agree that having unsealed and unsecured biological material, specifically blood material, situated right next to the right rear quarter panel of that SUV would not be within normal protocols for securing evidence, correct?
This was in the hands of a criminalist. It was an exchange of custody. I don't have any issue with it.
You don't know.
There's not even evidence log to mark, hey, this bag contains such and such. There's no photos showing exactly where the stuff was taken. There's no measurements taken at scene with photos. There's no, nothing is sealed. I mean, this whole thing, I mean, kids could do a better job. Some fifth graders could do a better job of evidence collection.
You have no personal knowledge of where that bag had been or where the cups had been previous to that photograph being taken.
Yeah, it's almost like they intentionally botched the crime scene so nobody could get prosecuted successfully. But then Karen shows up and Jen has this idea.
Correct.
You will agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood right next to the right rear of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination, wouldn't you?
Not in the hands of a trained criminalist, I wouldn't know.
Well, generally speaking, there were other people there that weren't the trained criminalists, right?
There was a photographer who took the pictures.
Who's not a trained criminalist.
Correct. But the cups weren't in his hands. It was in the criminalist's hands. Those are the criminalist's hands you see gloved in that photo.
That's not my question. My question is, there was unsealed blood and in an unsealed bag for how much time, you don't know, sitting right there by the right rear of that SUV, correct?
No, I do know.
How do you know?
Because I'm the one that brought the bag with the criminalist to that area. They photographed it, documented it, and then they transferred it to their plastic containers.
And before you grabbed that bag, you don't know where that bag had been for 3 days hence, 3 days before.
I know it had been in the temporary evidence room in a refrigerator.
You actually never saw it in the temporary evidence room in the refrigerator until February 1st, did you?
I don't recall.
So you don't know where that bag had been. You don't know who had handled those cups before you pulled them out of that temporary evidence locker, correct?
I have no personal knowledge if anybody else, I have no personal knowledge. I took them out of the refrigerator. That's all I can testify to.
Do you remember us talking about this about a year ago?
Yes.
And I asked you, would you agree that having unsealed and unsecured blood next to the right rear portion of the SUV is a recipe for cross-contamination? I asked you that question.
You did.
And you said, if I can speak to this incident alone, and I asked, that's a yes or no question.
That is correct.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you said, well, it's not a yes or no, but for your purposes, I would say yes.
Correct.
So it is, at least in your mind, a recipe for potential cross-contamination, correct?
Not in this particular situation, which was clarified later on.
Although you did say yes in answer
Hypothetically,
to my
anything,
question.
hypothetically, anything is possible, yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
All right, Mr. Brennan?
Okay, we didn't hear anything about all that volume of blood. And there could have been questions about why he didn't get access to the house to search it. I want to show you something here on case law. So when they said they didn't have access, that he didn't need access, there was no reason to go in the house. Well, if he was supposed to go to a party that night and he never made it in and other people were there, the place is dark, there's a cop there in the house, and you got a dead or dying cop in his front yard, of course you'd go in the house to make sure the occupants are safe. So I'm going to show you this Supreme Court case from 2006. This is a Supreme Court case, Brigham City, Utah versus Charles Stewart. This went up to the Supreme Court. It went through originally state of Utah. Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court Roberts delivered the opinion. In this case, we consider whether the police may enter a home without a warrant when they have an objectively reasonable basis for believing that an occupant is seriously injured or imminently threatened with such injury. We conclude that they may. So besides having a search warrant, you could have just asked consent of Brian Albert, and yet they never thought of that. They should have done that right away as soon as they showed up there, but they waited till later to even go in the house, several hours later. And what we have here is a case law basically backs them up and going back right away into the house to make sure the occupants are safe. How do you know the whole family isn't killed off in there? And so here, the case law especially for those of you that are not familiar with the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it says the basic principle of the Fourth Amendment law is that searches and seizures inside a home without a warrant are presumptively unreasonable. Nevertheless, because the ultimate touchstone of the Fourth Amendment is reasonableness, the warrant requirement is subject to certain exceptions. And it says how we have held, for example, that law enforcement officers may make a warrantless entry onto private property to fight a fire and investigate its cause, to prevent imminent destruction of evidence, hot pursuit or to engage in hot pursuit fleeing a suspect. So it says warrants are generally required to search a person's home or his person unless the exigencies of the situation make the needs of law enforcement so compelling that the warrantless search is objectively reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. One exigency obviating the requirement for the warrant is the need to assist persons who are seriously injured or threatened with such injury. Quote, the need to protect or preserve life or avoid serious injuries, justification for what would otherwise be illegal, absent an exigency or emergency. It says here, accordingly, law enforcement officers may enter a home without a warrant to render emergency assistance to an injured occupant or to protect an occupant from imminent injury. And then it goes on to say, it would be silly to suggest that police would commit a tort by entering the home to determine whether violence or threat of violence has just occurred or is about to soon or will occur. So it says here an action is reasonable in the Fourth Amendment, regardless of an individual officer's state of mind, as long as the circumstances viewed objectively justify the action. Here it says that the decision was such that in these circumstances, the officers had an objectively reasonable basis for believing both that the injured adult might need help and that violence in the kitchen was just beginning. Nothing in the Fourth Amendment required them to wait until another blow was render someone unconscious or semi-unconscious or worse before entering. The role of a peace officer includes preventing violence or in restoring order, simply not rendering first aid to casualties. An officer is not like a boxing or hockey referee, poised to stop a bout only if it becomes too one-sided. So basically that was by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2006. So these officers would have been trained on this law. And so defense did not bring this up. They did touch on consent briefly, but the issue on consent is, especially as a law enforcement officer, what are you saying? Brian Albert wouldn't allow them to search the entire house? So I just think that's something that could have been explored by the defense. I'm not going to get back to. Oops, sorry, I got my phone. I'm going to jump ahead then to they had the meteorologist testify, and that took a long time. Basically said, what the condition of the snow was. People that live up there, they know what snow's like. There's less than an inch on the ground when it was around 12 to 1 o'clock in the morning, when the time that the window that they're saying John O'Keefe was murdered. And by 6 o'clock in the morning, there's like 4 inches on the ground. So, and then it got up to like 20 something later. But in any case, the meteorologist really didn't have a whole lot of detail to say. He did talk about the frostbite aspect. Let me go to the notes here. Yeah, by 2 a.m. it was less than 0.8 inches there at the house. He said the ground was frozen, which it was like 29 degrees that night with wind chills probably in the teens, he said. Visibility is a mile and 1.25 miles. 15 degrees was the lowest temperature that night. Wind chill, average wind made it feel much colder. Might have felt like 0 10 at the highest. He wasn't asked to do a calculation. So he says up until midnight, there's very little snow accumulated, only enough to maybe track a cat walking across the ground. All right, then there was, we had Trooper Garano again. I'm not going to show that. There was more text between folks. We had Karen's voice, though, connected at 12:36 and 39 seconds to John's router. So that's her alibi right there. So the prosecutor actually brought that in. That was a good thing. Then they played voicemails where Karen saying at 12, right after she got there to John's place, saying how she hates him. And then you can hear apparently a butt dial where you can hear her walking in heels. They played that. Then they played the text where she says, "I'm going home. I'll see you later." In other words, I'm leaving your niece alone. That was all done to make John think, "Oh, wait a minute, my niece is going to be home alone. I better get home." So it's very clear from the communication that night that Karen did not trust John O'Keefe, and she thought that he was at some other gal's house, that he was cheating on her, and that's why she's freaking out. She's also under the influence. I'm sure she had some kind of antidepressant meds or MS type meds that would not have synergized well with alcohol, and that's all played into her in her and all these calls and all these texts. It made it look like she was just like obsessed with trying to get a hold of him because she felt like she's being cheated on, and she's trying to intervene and prevent that from happening. So that's sort of what came across as like, yeah, okay, I get it, it's normal. And then let's see here. There was a couple of video clips, 18 and 17. So let me go ahead and show those. Those are at 2:11:56. Here we go. Hold on a second. Got to get that shared on the screen.
So when John got out of the car at Brian Albert's house, he took my full vodka soda, which is sitting in the cup holder.
She's saying he took her vodka soda that was sitting there. So, okay, that's a really short clip again.
You will. All right, your next witness.
And here's video 17.
I gave an interview with ABC with Matt Gutman. I think this was whom I gave the interview to, and I said, he asked, why was I saying, could I hit him? Did I hit him? And I said, yeah, my first thought was I'd been out late, I'd been drinking, and he's in the general vicinity of where I last saw him. I mean, they talk about the left side of the property and the right as if it's, Hammersmith Farms. It's a postage stamp. It's 50 feet. So he's in the front yard to the left of the front door, and no one's coming out of the house. Jen's telling me nobody's seen him. So I'm thinking, Jesus, was I starting to pull away and I ran over his foot? Like, he's roughly where I left him. So yeah, when I found him, I was thinking, did I clip him somehow?
All right. So right there, I think that's very helpful to Karen Reed's team and Karen Reed, because she's actually making sense. It's like, of course you'd blame yourself. If you've learned that you dropped him off, you thought he went up to the front door, but then you find out what they said he never made in the house. From who? None other than Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe's the one that planted it in her mind that you must have been the one to hit him. And he never made it in the house. And so, yeah, you think blaming yourself. Anybody would do that. Anybody, you know. In for example, if you had a dog, let's say, and you took off, you had to go quick to work one morning, and you come home at the end of the day, and you notice your dog's ran over and dead in your driveway. Wouldn't you blame yourself right away, even though you didn't know anything, you didn't hear anything, you didn't even know the dog was outside? Let's say you had a doggy door, you didn't think the dog was there. You'd blame yourself right away before you even know any other details. Well, imagine what you're going to do with a loved one. Same kind of thing, even more so. And plus he's under the influence of alcohol and whatnot. So this is totally helpful. And I think it really gets a crystal clear picture of is how Jen was already setting her up right then and there. And she was believing it at the time that, well, Jen, why would Jen not tell me, anything but the truth? She's a friend of John, and she's trying to help me out. So anyway, so I thought this is very helpful, and it makes a whole lot of sense. And why she would really say, well, I must have hit him. Maybe I did. Did I hit him? You're just trying to you would blame yourself and probably even say that is, oh my gosh, I hit him. Oh my gosh, did I hit him? That's a normal reaction, even if you didn't hit him. And when you got somebody saying you didn't come in the house, you're going to blame yourself. And so, yes, Jen McCabe is at the center of the blame Karen comments. Exactly. She planted that seed in her mind. She's under the influence, not making sense. So she's just relating that here. So Brendan is thinking this looks bad, but this actually looks good for the defense. I'm glad he played this. So it shows, it basically shows you how the planting of the seed occurred to the drunk Karen Reed that morning. At 6:04 that morning, that's when Jen went into seed planting mode. She planted those seeds in her head. And of course, you would feel bad enough anyway with John being that condition. And then you're blaming yourself, all because of Jen. She blamed herself. All right, let's go ahead. Any comments before? I want to see if there's any comments. Yeah, we heard that from other testimony, we heard it was like he was 20 feet away. That came out of the first trial, that he was 20 feet away from the curb. So I don't think it was that far away, but he's far enough away from the curb. So how would she have hit him that far up into the curb off the road? Once he stand on the road? I mean, none of this makes any sense. It's absolutely an insane, radical, crazy theory that the prosecution has come up with. They can't even believe it themselves. I really believe they can't even believe it themselves. You really have to leave your common sense at the door to come up with this weird theory. They can't even explain how he fell and hurt himself or how he got hit and fell. They don't even know. They're just guessing and throwing it up against the wall, see what sticks. All right, now, then there was a, let me go back to the notes here. Then that was the Gilman, Robert Gilman, meteorologist. Yeah, I've already talked about that. Yeah, through that trooper Garano again, we saw multiple calls. Karen is freaking out, desperate to get a hold of John. All that's kind of normal stuff. Normal stuff for a 2-year relationship, and this guy doesn't show up. Of course, you'd be livid. And then we had Charles Ray. He learned of the Fairview incident, but didn't go there. He learned John O'Keefe was brought to the hospital, learned he died. Later in the day, he found out that he had died. He went to One Meadows for a well-being check because they had 2 unattended children, possibly. Yeah, later in the day, he died. But he went there at 8:23 in the morning. He showed a photo of Karen's SUV, and they're trying to show that was a crack in it. Let me get to that in a second. And then there's also a Kevin O'Hara. He's another lieutenant. He's with the Massachusetts State Police, 23 years. He's on the CERT team. And he said he went to Fairview at 4:13 p.m. on the 29th to do an evidence search. Other troopers arrived at 5:21, 5:24, 4:30, 5:34, and 5:41. So they did a line search from the front door down to the fire hydrant, looking for tail pieces, missing sneaker johns. They brought shovels, garden rakes, push rooms, headlights, found one piece of red tail light. Then they found a sneaker up against the curb and a lot more pieces of tail light near each other. And when asked, did you see anyone throw anything in your grid? No. Did anyone intrude on your grid? No. And neither Proctor or Buchanan were there for their search. On cross, Jackson says no crime scene tape, no barricade, no police presence. Only Lieutenant Tully was on scene when they arrived. After their search was underway, 2 more Massachusetts State Police and 2 Canton police arrived in plain clothes. A male came out of the 34 Fairview mudroom door, adult wearing a hooded T-shirt, never left that front door area. He asked, are you here for what happened earlier? They said yes, and he went back in the house. They had no idea who he was. They eventually stopped the search after the line search had located taillight in the sneaker, and that several additional feet of searching into the street did not yield anything. After the search was concluded over the subsequent several weeks, an additional 40 pieces of taillight were secured. That he didn't know that, though. And then Lieutenant Tully had said that he was very satisfied with what they've recovered. So they found one piece of additional taillight, all these guys. And keep in mind, this is a CERT team, like an emergency response team. They're not there to collect evidence. They still have not had CSI show up to the scene. So that's how botched and messed up this crime scene was. All right, so let's go here. 513. That's John O'Keefe's house here. That's his front door. All right, let's go to 513. That's like a normal, snowy day in the Northeast.
The time when you got there?
I didn't make note of it mentally at that time, but
Vehicle
I've
here,
since learned that.
straight ahead.
Is-
That's Karen's SUV. And what they're trying to do is a close-up. There's no depression in that
Is
area.
this video that you have just watched consistent with your memory that morning?
From this distance, it looks like it's a little bit redder on the right than on the left than on the right. The right, there could be some whiteness there, but there's no depression area. So it looks like the taillight's intact,
The cruiser cam is showing 2 vehicles.
at least to the form aspect of it. It doesn't look like there's major damage there. Otherwise, you'd see that in a concave.
In the driveway. When you arrived that morning, did you know whose vehicles they were?
And now they're going to show a close-up still shot.
Yes.
And could I have exhibit that morning? Were you working
Yeah.
as an investigator?
So right there, it doesn't look like anything's totally smashed out. It looks like it's got more snow and ice over it. I don't think that shows anything incriminating that there was any kind of smash out. Now, the amount of taillight they said it was smashed out beforehand, it doesn't look like anything like what you see there. And then let's jump ahead. I'm going to show a few minutes of O'Hara. This is Lieutenant O'Hara, the Massachusetts State Police. We'll do a few minutes of him here.
Crime scene tape up?
No, there was not, sir.
Was there any barricade up at all?
No, there was not.
Was there any evidence that the crime scene was being secured at that time?
There was no police presence on scene, sir.
Okay. So that when you arrived, the scene had been left unsecured. Do you know how long it had been left unsecured?
I do not, sir.
So before you arrived, at least, and before your presence was known, for some time before you got there, that scene could have been accessed by anyone, to your knowledge.
Well, I think the weather played a good help in us with the scene security, because with that being fresh, undisturbed snow, and with the man tracking we do, we would be able to determine if anyone had accessed that area.
Of course, of course. But you don't have any personal knowledge of anybody actually securing that scene for onlookers, bypassers, anybody that wanted access to it, they could have had it.
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Okay. You indicated that Lieutenant Tully first contacted you but exactly at 2:32 p.m., correct?
That is correct, sir.
At that time, your team was not stood up. In other words, you were not activated because that was an initial call by Lieutenant Tully, not an activation call, correct?
Correct. That's a courtesy notification, sir.
And at that time, Lieutenant Tully had not received the proper protocol, the proper approvals through the protocol to actually have your team activate and have your team dispatched.
Yes, I think he'll normally, when we get activated, before they start the process going through their chain.
Crash Daddy, yes, there was a dusting of snow and John O'Keefe, was struck in the head. Supposedly, if it happened around 12:30-ish, as they're saying now, there would be blood on the ground underneath his head. Yeah, absolutely. He lost 3 liters of blood. So 3 liters of blood, and the ground was frozen. If the ground is frozen, at least the initial top layer of it, maybe an inch or 2 down. We don't know the depth of it, but if you have the frost level there below the top level of the ground, it would basically seal the blood from going into the ground itself. And they could always extract the dirt from the ground as well. Dig it out and bring it to the evidence lab.
Chain of command, they'll call me just to see if we're available and if we could actually respond instead of wasting other people's time calling us if I were to say, no, we are already assigned on another mission at this time.
Right. So around 2:53, you indicated that one of your subordinates, Sergeant Simpson, notified the rest of the team that get ready, but we have not been given the green light.
Christina, you're saying Karen had almost no memory of that night. That is concerning. I wonder if the alcohol had negative interaction with MS meds. Well, that's what I've been saying. We don't know from Karen whether she had no memory at all from that night, or that's what Jen is saying about her. So that's not been clarified in my mind, how much she remembers directly versus what Jen is saying she claimed. Like, I have no memory of even going to 34 Fairview. So,
correct?
Correct, sir. Building an availability list of who could respond.
Okay. That was just a kind of a precursor, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, to make sure that you had the available personnel. So when the green light, or if the green light came, you could activate.
Correct. And to help start giving people the heads up to start shoveling their driveway. Like I said, as soon as I received that call from Lieutenant Tully, I hadn't shoveled my driveway yet.
Okay.
I went out and had to go clear my driveway and my cruiser. And the end of my driveway, we usually get plowed in by our plows. We had several feet of snow at the end of my driveway, sir.
Lucky you.
Yes.
All right. Did Lieutenant Tully inform you in that first phone call that colleagues of his, Massachusetts State Police colleagues of his, were already en route to Dighton to retrieve or seize the SUV?
He did not say that, sir.
Did Lieutenant Tully inform you that Massachusetts State Police had actually contacted the Dighton Police Department for their assistance in potentially seizing that SUV?
He did not tell me that, sir.
Did he indicate to you, you indicated that your conversation was at 12:32. Did he indicate that he had just gotten off the phone with Dighton PD at 12:31, just a minute prior?
Our phone call was at 2:32, sir.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if that can,
Did I say 12:32?
that's a different time you're looking to.
2:32, and he had just gotten off the phone with Dighton PD at 2:31. Did he indicate anything like that?
No, we did not, sir.
Okay. So we do know that at that 2:30-ish hour, you were not authorized to respond to the unit, to the location.
So anyway, this is again a complete joke. Having search and rescue type people looking for evidence. They're supposed to be looking for missing people, lost people, those kind of things. They're not supposed to be looking for evidence. That's not their role. They're not crime scene investigators. So again, you have this completely divergent from the norm type of investigation, quote unquote. All right, some of you guys are talking about Karen's voice message. So I'm going to go to some of that here. So you can see all these times John's not answering her, right? So let's.
Yes. Do you need the thumb drives?
I don't.
Okay.
Mark this, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
So these are the phone calls on the 29th. So at 12:35 a.m., the defendant calls John. That phone call is not answered. 12:34:09.
She was on her way to John's place at that time. She was still trying to reach him. Look at, she's calling at 12:34:09, 12:34:38, 12:35. I mean, she's like constantly calling him, trying to figure
a.m.
out what's
The defendant
going on.
calls John. It's not answered. 12:34:38 a.m. The defendant calls John. Not answered. It's not answered.
Sabrina, let me stop you there for a second.
Mhm.
Did you look into any internet connection between the defendant's phone and the router and the internet connection at Meadows Ave, John O'Keefe's home that night?
Yes. At 12:36:39 a.m. The defendant's phone auto connects to the Wi-Fi Hatsfan 123.
There you go.
Are you familiar with the router at Mr. O'Keefe's home?
I have not done a look at it in person, but that's the no network that's listed under it.
Did
Two
you
names.
learn?
Yes. So
Let me jump ahead.
12:39:03 a.m.
She
The defendant
definitely
calls
comes up
John.
getting drunk.
It's not answered. 12:30, 12:40.
You're walking around.
Defendant text John O'Keefe. Sorry. See you later
Five.
at 12:55:50, 12:58:47 a.m. The defendant calls John. It's not answered. 12:59:24 a.m. The defendant calls John. Voicemail number 3 is left with voice.
Ms. Gilman?
John, I'm here with your fucking kids. Nobody knows what the fuck you want.
All right.
No sound.
Very upset.
If your kid, I'm back in Mansfield, 10 a.m. The
Okay, right
defendant
there.
calls.
Hold on. When she says
104.
I'm back in Mansfield, the kids are home alone. That is like the ultimate thing she's trying to do is say, hey, the kids are alone. I am home. And you're not even going to be concerned about these underage kids home alone. That would really get him to pay attention. So she's feeling like I am that low to this guy that he doesn't even respond back to me. So what does she do? She responds back at 1:04 in the morning saying, okay, well, maybe me saying I'm back in Mansfield, and which is like, I think 25, 30 minutes away from John's house. Her house is in Mansfield. So she's really trying to get his attention here by making him think she left the house and the kids are alone. But she's obviously not, she hasn't left the house. She's just doing that to get his attention, but that doesn't even work. So she's going to do all this kind of stuff right after she tries to kill him to make herself the main suspect. I mean, this is so ludicrous for the prosecution to believe this is evidence that's going to convict her.
14 a.m. on the 29th. At 1:10:17 a.m., the defendant calls John. Voicemail number 5 is left with voice.
Ms. Gilman?
Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your fucking niece and nephew. You fucking pervert. You're a fucking pervert.
Calls John.
Just beside
It's not answered.
herself.
1:12:46 a.m., the defendant calls.
She keeps calling.
Sorry. 1:17 a.m., the defendant calls John. Not answered. 4:38:49 a.m.,
Break
the defendant
here
calls.
between 1:18 to 4:38. So she just had a little over 3 hours apparently of sleep before it's the end. She's thinking, wait a minute, something's really bad.
Calls John. Not answered. 4:39:39 a.m., the defendant calls John. Not answered. 4:40:05 a.m., the defendant calls John. not answered. 4:42:05 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 4:42:54 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 4:45:10 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:04:27 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:21:28 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:21:58 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered.
I think I've seen that.
5:23:26 a.m., the defendant calls John. Voicemail number 7 is left with voice.
Ms. Gilman?
John, I just want to tell you.
At 5:24:27 a.m., the defendant calls John,
She's
not
frantic.
answered. 5:25:28 a.m.
She's absolutely frantic. So that doesn't sound like somebody that's killed somebody. It's just ludicrous to think that.
The defendant calls John, not answered. 5:26:14 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:28:16 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:28:43 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:29:21 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered.
All right, we can.
5:29:46 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:30:15 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:30:52 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:31:21 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 5:36:29 a.m., the defendant calls John, not answered. 6:03:02 a.m., the defendant calls John, and voicemail number 8 is left with some voice and noise and background.
Ms. Gilman, could you play that, please?
Yes, I need someone to report his, 34 beautiful Vietnam living in Capitol now. Yeah. Okay, I know. Where's the blanket? I don't see blanket, Harry. Yes, I need
So that was hold on a second. That here is the voicemail from the vehicle. She left her phone in the car and called John's voicemail. So this is on John's voicemail from when she's out there trying to help save him. Doesn't that sound like somebody's trying to kill John that just killed him some time before that?
I know, Mom, I know the answer. I know.
You can tell she really cared about John, unlike what we saw from other folks.
If we have the lights on, please.
Yeah, I think I saw it a while ago some video where they show it's altered, that it's not accurate. The back tail light when it's at one meadow.
I have no further questions.
Okay, with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and just take questions now. We're looking at 12:24, so I got time for a couple questions here before we close up for the segment here. Yeah, thanks for you guys. Some of you have sent me some emails with info. Looking for red emojis for questions. You guys have a lot of comments. Yeah, Karen has some flaws. She's high strung. She apparently thought that John's friends would be her friends. She didn't kill him. Yeah, that's true. Julia Nielsen. The reason that Karen was taken to the hospital for a psych eval is because she called her parents and said that she wanted to end her life. And so her dad called the police, and that's why she got Section 12. And I know her mom said also, make sure you take the meds out of her purse. So that would lead me to believe there's some kind of meds that, could also be used to cause harm with her. And maybe if she's on those already, that leads me to believe, just from what I know about meds, is that meds can have a bad synergy effect when you mix them with alcohol. So that's maybe also why she was extremely upset that night. And if she didn't have a memory of what happened before, I mean, this alcohol alone, she's drinking vodka, hard liquor can have you get some blackouts, and you mix that with some kind of meds she might have been on, and so that can be a bad combination. And a lot of people don't even realize that are on those kind of medications, that you really should not be drinking any alcohol at all. Yeah, John Monagle, you're saying Karen was frantic, Jen McCabe was cool and emotionless. Yep. Yes, Lisa, you're saying she was the only one that this makes you cry. Karen's the only one that's freaking out. Cassandra Perez, my heart breaks every time I hear Karen screams for John. She clearly loved him and did not do this. Learning courage. Yeah, Karen was in a panic because she cared about John. All right, with that, folks, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up tonight. I'll plan to do some more coverage tomorrow night. Thanks for your support in the justice cause. There is a link that is posted on the channel here of how to support Karen. Sorry, X'd out of this StreamYard there. But anyway, check out this channel. There's a link where you guys can donate to the Defense Fund for Karen Reed. So we'll periodically put that up so you guys have quick access to that. So y'all have a good day or good night wherever you're at, and hope to be on tomorrow night as well. So take care. Thanks for supporting justice for Karen Reed.